There's a soft way that we look at the world, especially as we come into the beginning of summer, a time when we look with hope to summer night skies, perchance sitting around a campfire. But for me, growing up, it was a time to just be in nature, to find myself among the sweetgrass or the fields and walking across those endless plains. I've never felt more at home or more at peace than these times that I spent within these simple places of my childhood. There's a belief that we have to have this or that to make us happy. But sometimes the happiest times in our life are surrounded by things that come from the earth. So as we go into this Memorial weekend, I would ask you to maybe do some remembering with me, remembering of ourselves. So sit back, pour yourself a cup of coffee, relax, get ready, and let's go on this path of being able to find parts of ourselves we may have left behind along the journey. As the wheel turns backwards, I'm reminded of the importance of water in my life. Just looking and remembering about the beautiful river that ran through my home in Belle Fourche, South Dakota, which means beautiful forks. It was a place where all of the waters came together in a very actually dry and arid climate. When I was growing up, we were almost a hair of a fraction away from being considered a desert. Things are changing. The climate is changing, and South Dakota has actually found itself in a new climate zone since growing up. These times of these really stark images between this yellow landscape mixed with little hues of green next to and hugging those sacred waters of my state are changing. And that's the way of things. Nothing ever quite stays the same. Along the way, we sometimes feel like we lose parts of ourselves. Like somehow we lose our center of gravity. Growing up in the center of the nation, I was never more primed to be exactly where I was meant to be than where I was. These pictures that you see of my place in South Dakota and myself remind me of the little parts of myself that I may have left behind, but they're vastly important to who I am now. There is nothing in this world that marks us more than our relationship with our primal family. Whether they are part of our life for the whole of our growing up experience, or even for just a small time, they change our lives forever. Remembering where we came from reminds us of the bonds that were made in order for us to get here. Where would we be without those? Where would we be without the strong, stalwart women that perhaps formed the very foundation of our being? Sometimes allowing us to move the potter's wheel ourselves, and sometimes reaching in to give assistance. And this is the thing about when we have to remember our past. We find that there's a lot of good things in that mix as well. I have fond memories of growing up in Belle Fourche. And this is a picture of the Tri-State Museum then and now. And why this holds such special significance is because of my grandmother. My grandma, Clara, born Clara Radka, came from a long line of German immigrants. Her family originated from Bessarabia, which is now actually the Ukraine. And I have such fond memories of her. This beautiful woman who worked in Geneva's dress shop and always was dressed to the nines. I played for hours and hours in her cedar closet when I was growing up. And I just can't say enough how much she inspired me to be the woman that I am today. We used to call her Feisty Grandma because that she was. My grandmother, she had a life that, unless you look deeply into your relatives' lives, you will never understand the tapestry that they've woven. She's had many heartaches in her life. She married the love of her life, Fred Lovell, who you see here. And she had 3 children that we know of. Only 2 live. That would be my mother and her sister. But their young boy died just shortly after childbirth, as was common, of sudden infant death syndrome. And those things mark a woman's passage, and they mark how she looks at the world. Later, Grandpa Fred actually died in some of their favorite spots. They were out camping, I believe, at Ormond Dam, which is another place that I used to go to when I was growing up. And she was spending time with him. It was a very relaxed time, and he passed away in her arms of a heart attack. He had given up smoking years before, but sometimes those things catch up with us. So I have fond memories of the grandma who always made pancakes, the grandma who always had coffee brewing and soap operas on the television when I would come over to stay. And I know that this woman was always someone that would listen to my stories, would look at me without judgment, even if I made a mistake. And that was something I loved so dearly about her. Later, she went on to volunteer at the Tri-State Museum, which was only a short ways away from the house that we had purchased. I mean, when I say short, I mean it was only a minute walk to where it was. We purchased an old Victorian that she showed me the picture of in the museum that had been rolled down the road and on logs with Clydesdales to get to its final position at the head of the Belle Fourche River and the Redwater River. It was directly behind my home. So she also taught me a great love of history and the understanding of the importance of knowing where we came from and what that means in our lives. She taught me how to dress with pride and how to find pleasure in beautiful things. And she taught me how to love unconditionally. So as things happen and we move on through our life, I would find myself oftentimes coming back to South Dakota. Every child that I ever had, I would always migrate back. No matter where I was living at, no matter what was going on in my life. And it reminds us how much, like so much of the rest of the world, we migrate. Migration is a huge part of the memory that we have of ourselves, and not everybody stays in one place all the time. We are oftentimes drawn back to the things that bring us joy, the things that make us feel safe. South Dakota was always a place that the land spoke to me in a way that no place else could. I find myself here near the ocean, but I used to live in a place that had once the largest inland ocean ever, and that was the Badlands of South Dakota. I would oftentimes drive hundreds of miles to work every day and back to teach out at the college. It's still some of my fondest memories, those desolate roadways that took me to the places that I needed to be. Our path is never going to be the same as another, and that's something that we must remember, is that everyone is going to be walking their own journey, traveling their own roads, because this life is truly theirs. It doesn't belong to anybody else but themselves. So on this Memorial Day weekend, I would ask you to try to remember the parts of yourself that you may have left behind along those roadways. Try to remember the people that you met along that flowing river with kindness, even though there may have been times that were troubled. And think about the people that you may have left behind and how their lives are changed forever by your impact on them and their impact on you. And what the absence of them in our lives feels like, whether it be a veteran that has passed or a member of your own family. I was looking at several pictures today, and I had such a hard time deciding what was going to go into this montage. I realized that one of the pictures, everybody in that picture had already passed. From my sister all the way up to my grandmother, my father, and I know what my mother will be doing today for Memorial Day weekend. She'll be making sure the tombstones are decorated with flowers and that the people that have already passed are remembered. Also remember to find yourself along your journey. Go back and look at those pieces for yourself with love, and understand that you did the very best you could with the tools that you had in the present moment. And don't forget your inner child. For when we remember ourselves, we put ourselves back together and we make ourselves whole. There's a little one somewhere along your journey that is longing to be back home with you. We ask that you remember her or him. Thank you.